the quantum loophole that makes you immortal. You never experience your own death. That line fuels the claim you're quantum immortal. If reality branches for every quantum event, won't you only wake up in the branches where you survive, and therefore never stop waking? Here's the problem. People swap existence for expectation. In the next few minutes, I'll show you many worlds without the sci-fi gloss, why decoherence is the plumbing, and how the born rule, not branch counting, sets your actual survival odds. We'll expose the selection trap behind suicide experiments, preview practical payoffs you can use today, and name the single mistake that breaks the immortality pitch. Quick, clean physics, no mysticism. What people get wrong about quantum immortality. The viral story sounds airtight. In many worlds, every outcome happens in some branch. So as long as a branch exists where you live, you keep experiencing survival. That's slick and wrong where it matters for prediction. First, existence isn't typicality. People leap from a survival branch exists to I should expect to find myself there. In Everett's picture, branches carry amplitudes. Amplitudes squared give weights, the born rule. A survival branch with near zero amplitude still exists, but it contributes almost no weight to your expected experiences. Your rational forecast should track weight, not mere logical possibility. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Existence doesn't buy expectation. Second, decoherence is a mechanism, not a miracle. When a microscopic trigger couples to a lethal device, the combined system entangles with the environment. Off-diagonal terms vanish for all practical purposes, leaving stable pointer states like fired and didn't. That's branching. But decoherence doesn't change weights, it stops interference. No collapse, no probability boost, just records locked with the measures they started with. Third, survivor bias plus anthropic reasoning seduces you. I'm here, therefore I survived, is true and empty. You only ever observe from branches where observation is possible. That selection effect makes survival unsurprising, conditioned on being an observer, but it doesn't upgrade low-weight branches into high-weight expectations. The update you get from I'm alive is almost zero unless it sits inside a long, independent streak. And long streaks are usually evidence your inputs were wrong, not proof of immortality. Now here's where most people mess up. They treat you like a privileged thread forced to traverse the tree. That sneaks metaphysics into a probability question. In a branching account, what matters is how much born weight goes to each future observer moment that inherits your memories. Even if a branch exists where you live to 10,000, your rational expectation isn't to land there. It's to land where most of the measure goes. And most measure goes where ordinary risks add up. Fourth, the roulette fallacy. Imagine Russian roulette with a quantum trigger. Some branches continue, others end. The naive leap says, I'll only experience the alive ones, so I'll keep waking up. But expected experience isn't a yes-no counter, it's weighted by measure. If survival weight halves each round, your future observer moments dilute exponentially. You aren't buying infinite tomorrows, you're burning probability capital faster and faster. A quick story. Someone once argued they could prove immortality by running a quantum-triggered roulette. I asked, what outcome would change your mind? If they died, no report. If they lived, confirmed. That's a selection trap. One person, one trial, zero statistical power. The positive narrative is guaranteed precisely in the only branches where speech remains possible. Another confusion, more splits as life preserver. People imagine more branching boosts survival. No, decoherence just reveals and stabilizes outcomes. It doesn't mint extra survival weight. Think of measure like a budget. Hazards spend it, correlated hazards torch it. Reckless choices multiply losses. After repeated risks, your survival weight shrinks to dust. Many worlds explains everyday statistics. It doesn't overwrite them with miracles. Identity adds one more lure. If you think identity is a single metaphysical line, you'll try to ride it. The cleaner move is continuity budgeting. Treat future continuers, each with your memories, as a portfolio weighted by the born rule. Then the immortality pitch loses steam. Tails exist, typicality rules. Your expectations follow weight. Here's the payoff you actually care about. Believing the loophole tempts people to take dumb risks. Some branch saves me. But if you're making life decisions on that story, it isn't philosophy, it's a bet. And you're losing. The honest fix is simple and powerful. Forecast with weights, not wishes. Optimize the portfolio, sleep, safer routes, checklists, screenings, to shift measure toward the continuers you'd want to be. That's how you stack odds in the only branches you'll typically meet. The many worlds interpretation, cleaned up. Let's strip away the sci-fi and keep the parts you can actually use. Start with the rule nobody disputes. The Schrödinger equation drives everything smoothly and deterministically. That's unitary evolution. No hidden dice. When a measurement happens, nothing special gets added. The same equation just acts on a larger system that includes the apparatus, the room, and you. Measurement isn't a magic event. It's entanglement widening its scope. Here's the clean picture. A spin in a superposition meets a detector. The joint state becomes spin up with detector up plus spin down with detector down. Then the environment, air, photons, your retina, soaks up which outcome information. Relative phases between those alternatives scramble into an astronomical number of degrees of freedom. Interference between the alternatives becomes effectively impossible. That's decoherence. Nothing is deleted. It's just that the information needed to make the alternatives interfere is now everywhere and practically unrecoverable. Those decohered alternatives are what we call branches. They're not soap bubble universes popping into existence. They're stable, non-interacting histories encoded in the universal wave function. The appeal is elegance. Keep the math. Drop the special collapse rule. All outcomes allowed by the dynamics continue evolving, but they can't talk to each other once the environment has locked in the records. So where does probability come from if everything happens? From weights. The Born rule says squared amplitudes set the measure of each branch. In collapse stories, that's an axiom about chances. In many worlds, you earn it by asking how a rational agent should value their future continuers before they decohere. Two complementary routes lead to the same place. Decision-theoretic arguments, shout out to Deutsch and Wallace, show that if your preferences stay consistent across physically equivalent gambles, you must care about continuers in proportion to amplitude squared. Jerk's invariance root starts from symmetries in entangled states. If swapping equal amplitude components changes nothing locally, you must weight them equally. Refining that symmetry recovers the full Born rule. Different lenses, same conclusion. You don't count branches, you weight them. Now here's the subtle part most people skip. You can't split in any basis you like. The system, environment interaction picks a preferred robust basis, pointer states that survive constant monitoring. For counters, it's clicked versus not. For macroscopic stuff, it's localized, thermodynamically stable patterns. Interference between pointer histories is crushed on absurdly short timescales for big systems, which is why the world looks classical. The basis isn't a choice. It's selected by the interaction Hamiltonian. Also, decoherence isn't collapse. If in principle you could collect every phase carrying photon and phonon and reverse their interactions, you could recohere what looked like separate histories and see interference return. In small systems, quantum eraser experiments do exactly that. Hide which path info and fringes bloom, reveal it and fringes die. For macroscopic records, recoherence requires microscopic control over astronomical details. Practically impossible, but conceptually allowed. So we treat branches as separate worlds for all practical purposes while remembering the universal wave function never literally fragments. So what does this mean for you? You're a physical process that becomes entangled with outcomes. After a measurement, there are multiple observer states, each with definite records and the same memories up to the split. Before the interaction, you face self-locating uncertainty. Which record will this continuer read? The rational forecast, if you keep your preferences coherent, is to weight those continuers by Born measure. That's how you talk about which one is me, without smuggling in a metaphysical coin flip. And this is exactly where the immortality pitch breaks. Existence of a survival branch doesn't grant typicality. Weights do. Repeat hazards, and survival weight multiplies down. Many worlds doesn't give you a privileged thread to ride. It gives you a budgeting rule for expectation across all continuers with your memories. The same calculus that produces stable lab statistics tells you not to bank on miracle tales for your future. One more clarity pass. Collapse models tack on a special rule for measurements and leave fuzzy where measurement begins. Many worlds avoids that boundary problem by applying unitarity universally and letting decoherence explain classical records. But that elegance comes with responsibility. You can't freeload on classical probability language and then ignore the born weights. Decision theory and invariance are your receipts. They justify treating amplitude squared as the thing you should plan around. If you remember nothing else from this cleanup, hold this compact model. Unitary evolution everywhere. Measurement as entanglement. Decoherence selecting pointer states and killing interference. Born weights governing rational expectation over your continuers. Once that clicks, the temptation to count branches fades. You stop pretending existence equals expectation, and you start forecasting with the weights you actually have. That shift isn't just tidy philosophy. It's the difference between telling a cool story and making correct bets about your life. Decoherence, the hidden machinery behind branching. If many worlds is more than a slogan, decoherence is the machinery that makes it work. Without it, branches are just poetry. With it, you get a concrete reason why you see definite outcomes and stable records without invoking a magic collapse. Start with why this matters. Quantum states prefer superposition, but your life runs on crisp facts. Detectors click, digits settle, memories cohere. Collapse postulates explain that by decree. Decoherence explains it by dynamics. Phase information leaks into the environment so fast that alternatives which could have interfered become effectively non-communicating. Once interference dies, classical-looking histories are the only ones available to creatures like us. Now the what? Decoherence is environment-induced superselection. Certain states, the pointer states, are robust because the system, environment interaction keeps measuring them. A Geiger counter's silent versus clicked, a needle's position, a cat's macroscopic life signs. These are patterns the environment redundantly records. Air molecules, photons, and vibrations scatter off those macrostates, entangle with them, and disperse their delicate relative phases. In the density matrix, off-diagonal terms vanish for all practical observers. Nothing is deleted. The phase is just buried in a billion degrees of freedom you can't get back. Let me stack the logic cleanly. Take a spin in a sewer position of up and down. Couple it to a detector that goes U for up and D for down. The joint state becomes a sewer position. Up plus U plus down plus D. Now let the room do its thing. Photons reflect, air rattles, your retina absorbs. Each interaction copies which outcome into different fragments of the environment. Very quickly, the environmental states correlated with U and D become nearly orthogonal. To make U and D interfere again, you'd have to rewind the detector, the room, your eyes, and the infrared glow leaking into the walls. That means microscopic control over astronomical details. The timescales are brutal. A carefully shielded qubit can hold coherence for microseconds to seconds. A dust grain in sunlight decoheres in about 10⁻31 seconds, effectively instant. Macroscopic pointers snap into clicked, or not almost immediately. The world is constantly measuring itself. That's why classicality isn't a miracle. It's the consequence of unavoidable, continuous monitoring by the environment. Here's the shortcut most people miss. Decoherence picks the bases. You don't get to choose a convenient splitting after the fact. The interaction Hamiltonian does. States that dump the least phase into the environment, localized packets, definite pointer positions, survive. Exotic superpositions smear their phase into the surroundings and get shredded. That's why you experience solid chairs and readable digits, not ghostly furniture and smeared numbers. Now you might be thinking, isn't this just collapse with extra steps? No, collapse removes alternatives. Decoherence keeps all terms, it just prevents them from interfering. In small setups, quantum eraser experiments show this directly. Hide which path information and fringes return. Reveal it and fringes vanish. That's recoherence in miniature. For macroscopic records, recoherence is fantasy-level hard, but the principle is the same. So branches are effectively autonomous, not literally severed. The thing to remember is what decoherence doesn't do. It doesn't change probabilities. It changes accessibility. Born weights, amplitudes squared, are set by the unitary dynamics before the environment scrambles phase. Decoherence locks those weights into robust records by crushing cross terms. Branching doesn't mint extra survival measure. It parcels existing measure into distinct histories. That's the exact reason the immortality pitch fails. You can't count branches to win. You have to track weights, and decoherence leaves those weights untouched. This also explains objectivity. Quantum Darwinism says the environment redundantly encodes pointer information into many independent fragments, different photons, different patches of air. Lots of observers can sample different slices and still recover the same, the detector click bit. Agreement isn't mystical, it's redundancy. That's how you and I end up with the same facts without comparing notes first. A lab line that nails it. Our job is to stop the universe from measuring our qubit. That's quantum control. Every stray microwave photon is a spy for the environment. The longer you keep those spies out, the longer interference survives. When you can't, decoherence wins and facts become public. Common mistakes to avoid. Treating decoherence as optional. It's ubiquitous. Isolation is the exception. Treating decoherence as probability magic. It's record magic, not weight magic. Picking an arbitrary basis. The environment picks, pointer states win. So how do you use this? Forecast with weights, not wishes. Decoherence guarantees your future continuers read definite records in the pointer basis. The Born rule tells you how much to expect each continuer to show up. And the choices you make, sleep, safer routes, checklists, redundancy, tilt amplitude toward continuers who keep clear records and intact cognition. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Decoherence turns a universal wave function into locally classical histories by killing interference in the pointer basis while leaving Born weights intact. That's the plumbing. It's why lab statistics are stable, why shared facts exist, and why counting miracle branches won't save you from ordinary odds. Personal identity under branching. What is you? We've nailed the plumbing, unitary evolution, entanglement, decoherence, Born weights. Now comes the slippery part. Who is the you that forecasts across branches? If you treat identity like a single, sacred thread, branching feels like a cheat code. Somewhere you live, therefore you live. But that's the metaphysical trap that smuggles immortality back in. The useful move is simpler. Identity is a pattern. Survival is continuity weighted by measure. Start with stakes you can feel. Planning only works if you know what you're protecting. You're not guarding a mystical tag, you're guarding a cognitive pattern, memories, values, attention, judgment, style. That's the you that matters for decisions. In a branching world, multiple continuers can carry that pattern forward. Before the split, you care about all of them in proportion to Born weight. After the split, each continuer just is themselves, reading a definite record. No metaphysical coin flip needed. Here's the key shift. Swap identity talk for continuity budgeting. Pre-branch, you face self-locating uncertainty over which continuer will read your next frame. Rationality demands you allocate care by amplitude squared. That's the same logic that makes lab statistics line up with the Born rule. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Don't count heads. Weight observer moments by measure. Okay, so what counts as a legitimate continuer? High fidelity inheritance of what you value about your mind. Two dials matter. Fidelity, how strongly memory, values, and cognitive style persist. Weight, how much Born measure flows to that continuum. High fidelity at high weight is the sweet spot. High fidelity at tiny weight is inspiring and unbankable. High weight with wrecked fidelity isn't the win you think it is. A clean example makes it concrete. Say a therapy offers 70% full cognitive recovery, 25% moderate impairment, 5% death. In a branching picture, all three outcomes exist, but your expected experience is dominated by the 70% continuer who still thinks like you. Plan with that weight, and you're already acting like many worlds says you should, protecting the high fidelity, high weight future. Now here's where most people mess up. They try to ride a privileged thread, imagining a guaranteed survivor who keeps waking no matter what. Or they count copies. 2 of me means 50-50. Both moves are wrong. There's no blessed filament, and multiplicity without measure is noise. The environment picks the pointer basis. Decoherence makes records definite, and born weights tell you how much future you exists where. There's also a degradation trap. Survival isn't binary. Continuity can thin without death, concussions, strokes, sleep debt, chronic stress, toxins, isolation. You can leak measure into continuers you wouldn't endorse, confused, impulsive, detached from long-term goals. If you believe a loophole will rescue you, you'll overlook these slow leaks. That's how people drift into worse timelines while technically surviving. The fix is upstream. Protect fidelity and weight together. So how do you operationalize this? Use a 3-part checklist. Define continuers, those who inherit today's memories and values with high fidelity. Weight by physics. Amplitude squared sets expectation. Don't count copies or miracle tales. Protect fidelity. Sleep regularity, cardiorespiratory fitness, blood pressure and lipids, cognitive challenge, social ties. These keep the pattern crisp. Add 2 constraints. Kill correlations. Alcohol plus fatigue plus speed plus rain multiplies failure. Build redundancy. Seatbelts, checklists, backups, second opinions. Independent supports keep continuers on track when one guard fails. Let me land this with 2 quick micro stories. A viewer said, "If there's always a branch where I dodge the car, I'm safe." The correction was simple. Tails exist, typicality rules. They added a helmet, reflective gear, and earlier departures. Near misses dropped. Their high-fidelity continuers got more weight. Another person faced a procedure with real risks. We computed continuity-weighted value and added recovery safeguards that increased both weight and fidelity. Sleep targets, blood pressure control, family support. They didn't bet on a loophole. They bought better continuers. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Expected future, U equals born weight times psychological fidelity. Optimize both. When choices trade a tiny bump in weight for a big hit to fidelity, or vice versa, slow down. You're budgeting your future observer moments. One last clarity line. Post-split, each continuer is equally real. The decision problem was upstream, which futures to create, protect, and empower. That's where your agency lives. Forecast with weights, design for fidelity, break risk correlations, and build redundancy. Do that, and you stop fantasizing about miracle branches and start meeting more of yourself in the branches where your mind actually feels like you. The Quantum Immortality thought experiment corrected. Let's take the famous setup and clear out the sleight of hand. You link a lethal device to a quantum event, say a Geiger counter watching a radioactive decay for a fixed window. If it clicks, poison releases. If not, you live. In a collapse story, you live with probability 1 minus p and die with probability p. In a branching story, the universal state evolves into 2 decoherent histories, one with you alive, one with no observer. Both persist with fixed born weights and no cross-talk. So why do people think this proves you'll never experience death? Because pre-measurement you face self-locating uncertainty. After branching, there's a continuer who reads alive, and there's no reader in the lethal branch. It's tempting to say, since experience only happens where I'm alive, I'll always experience survival. That swaps existence for expectation. Yes, observations only occur in alive branches. No, that doesn't make those branches typical. Your forecast must track born weights. Here's the corrected lens. Pre-trigger, Your future is a portfolio of continuers. The alive continuer carries weight 1 minus p. The lethal branch carries p and contributes no experience. Your anticipated experience is dominated by 1 minus p, exactly like ordinary probability. Many worlds didn't smuggle in extra survival. It explained why classical calculus works without collapse. Now iterate the stunt with p equals 1, 2. After n rounds, branches exist where you've survived them all. True. But the total survival weight is 1/2n. It shrinks exponentially. After 1,000 rounds, the survival branch exists with weight 2 minus 100 microscopic. Existence doesn't pay experience. The overwhelming measure sits with histories where you were eliminated early. Your expected observer moments don't stretch, they evaporate. Let me show you exactly how this compounds in your head. Before round 1, your chance to wake is 1, 2. After 2 rounds, 1, 4. After n, 1/2 n. That's the same multiplicative risk math you already use for seatbelts and smoke alarms. Branching keeps all outcomes and freezes their weights. Decision theory tells you to act on those weights. But what about conditioning on survival? If you wake after 5 rounds, you're in a branch consistent with 5 survivals. For small n, that's normal. For large n, that observation is so atypical under your original model that you should question your inputs. Were trials independent? Was p misestimated? Did the device even fire? Tail observations are better evidence against your setup than for immortality confirmed. Now here's where most people mess up. They imagine a suicide test gives personal proof. One observer, one trial, and the negative outcome can't report. Survival guarantees a triumphant post in the only branches with a voice. Failure guarantees silence. That's a selection filter masquerading as data. It can't distinguish branching from luck, malfunction, or miscalibration. If a result can't go against you, it can't support you. Not all hazards are binary either. Tie your trigger to degradation instead of death, hypoxia, brain injury, toxic shock, and the same logic bites. The measure of high-fidelity continuers erodes each round. Instead of immortality, you get quantum lingering, where long-lived tails contain impaired continuers with thin psychological continuity. You kept waking technically, but not as the continuer you meant to protect. Let sanity check with expected utility. Suppose each round pays $1 if you survive, 0 if not, and you can stop anytime. 1 round 50 cents, $2 rounds 25 cents, N dollars rounds, 1/2 N dollars. The longer you play, the faster the expected return collapses. Swap dollars for observer moments and you see the real price. You're not compounding immortality, you're compounding loss. A micro story from office hours. A grad said, "If I keep waking, that's decisive." I asked them to pre-register hypotheses, outcomes, and updates. On paper, every path collapsed to the same post. Survive, announce victory, do, silence. They realized it's unfalsifiable from the inside. Once that clicked, the glamour evaporated. A design that guarantees a glowing narrative in the only branches that can narrate manufactures belief, not knowledge. Here's a sharper way to hold it in your head. Survival weight is probability capital. Each independent hazard spends it, correlated hazards torch it. You can't grow capital by counting branches. You can only redirect amplitude upstream, safety protocols, redundancy, sleep, better routes. So more of your continuers live in high fidelity, high weight histories. The roulette fantasy is a capital shredder. You might still wonder, if some survival branch always exists, won't I inevitably experience it? No, experience tracks measure. In the same way you shouldn't plan retirement around winning the lottery, you shouldn't plan life around vanishing measure tails. Tails exist, typicality rules. That's the whole point of waiting. 2 final checkpoints to keep you honest. 1. If your survival streak is longer than your model expects, update against your inputs. P was wrong, trials weren't independent, or the device never armed. 2. Ask the counterfactual. What result could have lowered your confidence? If the answer is none I can observe, you're not running an experiment, you're building a narrative. If you remember nothing else from this correction, remember this. The thought experiment doesn't guarantee life. It audits your measure. Survival branches exist, but weights multiply down under repeated risk. Born weights govern expectation, decoherence locks records, and decision theory tells you to act on the distribution you can actually cache. Count branches and you'll tell a cool story. Track weights and you'll make smarter bets with the life you have. Ethics and the suicide experiment debate. We need to talk about the stunt everyone whispers about and nobody should attempt. The so-called quantum suicide experiment promises a shortcut. Tie your life to a quantum trigger, and if you keep waking, claim many worlds and maybe immortality wins. The appeal is seductive. If experience only occurs where you're alive, it feels like physics itself guarantees you'll keep opening your eyes. It sounds bold. It's actually a failure of science and ethics dressed as courage. Start with evidence. A one-person, one-trial design has zero statistical power. Negative outcomes can't report. Positive outcomes are guaranteed in precisely those branches where someone remains to speak. That's not data, that's a selection filter. If disconfirmation is unobservable, confirmation means nothing. You can't test a theory by silencing the falsifying cases and broadcasting only survivals. Now here's where most people mess up. They confuse vivid personal surprise with inferential weight. I survived 10 rounds, wow. Under ordinary probability, streaks happen. Without independent observers, controls, pre-registered updates, and a dataset that includes failures, you've learned nothing beyond I'm among survivors, which was already a tautology. Real tests collect outcomes across many observers and many trials. A lethal setup destroys the dataset when it fails, and keeps only the flattering slice when it succeeds. Even worse, the expected harm dominates. In a born-weighted forecast, each round shoves huge measure into termination or degraded continuers. The tiny measure that reports success doesn't repay what you burned, and you don't pay alone. You impose risks on others. Family who get the call, first responders who find you, coworkers who absorb shock, communities that endure copycats. Those are real people in real branches, and they don't get a vote. Let me show you exactly how the ethics and the math align. Remember the portfolio model. Your future selves form a distribution. A suicide test reallocates the vast majority of that distribution into no observer at all, with much of the remainder degraded by collateral harms. Hypoxia, shock, trauma. That's before you count externalities. Grief, imitation, institutional damage. Even if you wake in a survivor branch, you haven't distinguished branching from luck or instrument error. You bought no knowledge, you sold your measure. A micro story that punctures the glamour. A grad told me if I wake up, that's decisive for me. I asked them to pre-register beliefs and update rules. On paper, every path led to the same post. Live, announce victory, do, silence. They realized it was unfalsifiable from the inside. If a result can't go against you, it can't support you. You might be thinking, what if I isolate harms and accept the risk? Here's the hidden cost. You degrade norms of evidence. You reward spectacle over method and encourage copycats who won't isolate harms. Science advances by branch-independent receipts. Interference fringes toggled by which path information, tunable decoherence rates, redundancy of pointer records, reversible measurements in mesoscopic labs, not by performative trials that torch most of the dataset. Here's the clean rule. Never test theories with irreversible stakes when failures can't be counted. That's not timidity, that's epistemology. A design that guarantees a glowing narrative in the only branches that can narrate manufacturer's belief, not knowledge. So what should curiosity look like? Test the plumbing, not the headline. Push coherence times longer. Map decoherence channels and throttle them. Demonstrate quantum eraser effects cleanly. Probe quantum Darwinism by measuring redundancy of pointer information in independent environment fragments. Explore Wigner's friend's style reversals in controlled systems where facts unmake when which path data is erased. Those roots return evidence wherever anyone wakes. And there's a moral frame that scales. Don't leak measure into futures you don't endorse, yours or anyone else's. Helmets and seatbelts, yes. Clear protocols, redundancy, pre-registration, yes. Lethal stunts that convert almost all measure into silence, no. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Quantum suicide is unfalsifiable for the person attempting it, uninformative for everyone else, and unethical in expectation. Some say, but what if I'm careful and hurt no one? You can't be careful with a lethal device. The moment you tie your life to a quantum trigger, you've already lost. Keep the ambition. Keep your life. Put the energy into experiments that teach us something in every branch. Evidence we can actually use. Let's drop the stunts and look at receipts everyone can read, wherever they wake up. If quantum immortality leans on many worlds, the honest way to probe it is by testing the plumbing. Unitarity, interference, decoherence, and how classical records emerge. These don't prove immortality or kill it outright. They show whether the mechanism people invoke, branching plus born weights, matches reality. Start with interference. The lesson's brutal and universal. Whenever which path information leaks, fringes vanish. Hide that information and fringes return. Quantum eraser experiments nail this. Tag a path and interference dies. Erase the tag and it blooms again. The toggle tracks information flow, not consciousness or a magic collapse. That's exactly what decoherence predicts. Gain path info, kill interference, lose it, let amplitudes add. Scale up and watch control improve. Optomechanical membranes cooled near ground state, superconducting qubits behaving like artificial atoms, interference with ever heavier molecules. Each milestone shows the Schrödinger equation doesn't quit at the lab door. When labs isolate better and shield noise, coherence stretches on cue. If phase doesn't leak, superpositions live. When it leaks, interference dies. That rhythm is unitarity plus environment doing the work. Now zoom in on decoherence rates. Engineer a bath, phonons, photons, thermal noise, and measure coherence decay. Tweak the coupling and the curve shifts exactly as theory says. For tiny systems, you can reverse some of it. Variants of quantum erasers deliberately erase or reveal which path records and watch interference turn on and off. No collapse postulate required, just unitary dynamics with the environment keeping the books. Push further and you hit quantum Darwinism. The idea that the environment redundantly records pointer state information so many observers can agree on facts. In real platforms, spins, photons, trapped ions, experiments show redundant encoding of system states into multiple, independently accessible environment fragments. Different observers sample different fragments and still recover the same detector-clicked bit. Objectivity is redundancy. That's the cosmos handing you shared records without a privileged observer. What about Wigner's friend, style tensions? Inside a small lab, someone treats a measurement as a definite outcome. From outside, a super observer treats lab plus system as coherent. Recent demonstrations simulate that tension by reversing small measurements. Erase which path information and earlier facts revert to interference. Reveal it and the facts set. Reality doesn't melt. Records are relative to decohered scope. Again, that's plumbing, not mysticism. Now hear us what these experiments do and don't do. Do. Support universal unitarity. Confirm decoherence as the mechanism suppressing interference between macrostates, and explain agreement via redundant environmental records. Don't. They don't show minds hopping to lucky branches, or that identity outruns statistics. Standard quantum mechanics gives you weights, not willpower. People still ask for a smoking gun that crowns an interpretation. You won't get MWI proven Tuesday. Competing interpretations are built to be empirically equivalent on standard predictions, so you use inference to the best explanation. If one framework reuses the same unitary math everywhere and earns classicality from decoherence and redundancy, while others bolt on collapses or hidden variables, you weigh simplicity, scope, and fit. That's disciplined reasoning, not faith. Here's the asymmetry that matters. We can directly test interference control, decoherence channels, redundancy, and reversibility. We can't personally test. I'll always wake up because failures delete the reporter. That's why quantum suicide isn't just unethical, it's epistemically empty. The inside result can't go against you. The outside world loses data. Meanwhile, interference tests succeed or fail in every branch where anyone cares. So what should you watch if you want real traction? Longer coherence in bigger systems. Every win pushes classicality further from being fundamental. Tunable environments with predicted decoherence rates. When models land on the nose as coupling changes, confidence climbs. Redundant records in live platforms. The more cleanly we map objectivity to environmental copying, the less mystery around facts. Reversible measurements at mesoscopic scales. Any clean unmaking of small facts, when which path info is erased, reinforces unitarity plus decoherence. One researcher joked, "We're not testing many worlds, we're testing many ways the world hides phase." Exactly. Every time phase leaks, interference dies. Every time we corral it, interference blooms. That reproducible toggle is the receipt. Bottom line, you can't test immortality, but you can hammer the machinery people wave around to sell it. Interference, decoherence, redundancy, reversibility. Branch-independent receipts. The more those land, the less room there is for magical probability boosts, and the clearer it becomes that weights, not wishes, govern what you should expect to live through. Anthropic reasoning, powerful, misused, necessary. Before we wander into cosmic tales and last observer lore, we need the tool people cite and almost nobody handles cleanly: anthropic reasoning. Used well, it guards you from fooling yourself. Used sloppy, it rubber stamps the story you wanted, especially the "I must survive" narrative. Start with why you need it. Your data is always filtered by the fact you're an observer. You can't waken branches where you can't observe. That selection is automatic. If you ignore it, you'll over-update on trivial facts like "I'm alive," drift toward quantum immortality conclusions, and start making bad bets. If you master it, "I'm here" becomes a weak datum, and you hunt for signals in what typical observers like you see. So what's the clean version? Pick a reference class tied to your question, then weight its members by the physics that produces them. For near-term forecasts, your class is future continuers who inherit my memories right now, and the weights are born measures. For cosmology, your class might be observers embedded in redundant external records, with weights set by processes that actually make such observers. Different questions, different classes, same core. Typicality over measure weighted observer moments, not head counts. Let me make this concrete with two puzzles people love to tangle. First, sleeping beauty. Quick version: beauty is put to sleep on Sunday. If a fair coin lands heads, she's awakened on Monday only. If tails, she's awakened on Monday and Tuesday with her memory of each waking erased afterward. She wakes. What credence should she assign to heads? The key move is to count observer moments, not storytellers. There are twice as many awakenings under tails. If the awakenings are indistinguishable, typicality across those awakenings pushes you to 1-3 for heads, 2-3 for tails, assuming equal physical production of those moments. In branching contexts, replace number of awakenings with awakening measure. Equal amplitude awakenings get equal weight, unequal ones don't. You don't magic yourself into the rarer case by liking it. Second, the doomsday flavor. You learn your temporal index, say you're roughly midstream among all human births, and wonder if that predicts near-term extinction. The mature move is to combine base rates with typicality. Being typical under a reasonable measure is more likely than being an extreme outlier, but one index datum is weak. Translate this back to survival. "I'm alive now" barely nudges anything. Surviving 100 independent 50-50 hazards, though, that would be so atypical under the stated model that you should first question independence or p-values long before you whisper immortality. Now here's where most people mess up. They condition on dramatic outcomes and forget prior weight. If I wake after n lethal rounds, destiny put me there. Conditioning is fine, overeating it is. Under the weighted distribution, small n is typical, large N is vanishingly atypical. As atypical observations pile up, rational agents challenge apparatus, independence, and calibration before they promote existence to expectation. That's Bayesian sanity, not pessimism. Practical method you can run today. Define the question precisely. Forecasting your next conscious moment or inferring global structure. Choose a reference class that actually fits the question. For next moment forecasts, it's your continuers with today's memories. Assign weights from the generative process. In branching, that's amplitude squared. In simulations, it's fidelity times runtime across instances. Check typicality. Ask, is my observation typical under this weighted distribution? If not, update against inputs, not toward miracle tales. Concrete example. You face a medical procedure with a 90% chance of smooth recovery and 10% fatal. I woke up tomorrow as expected. It barely moves your beliefs about physics. Repeat that independently 10 times and keep waking. Under the stated model, you're deep in the tail. The clean update is, risks were correlated, probabilities misestimated, or the protocol changed, not immortality confirmed. Another everyday case. You've dodged 3 supposed 1 in 1,000 disasters. 2 possibilities dominate. Your risk estimates were wildly off or the events were dependent. There's a third possibility. You're the rare outlier, which is exactly what you'd observe if you were that outlier. That's not evidence for loopholes. That's how probability looks from the lucky seat. 2 guardrails tattooed on your forecasting. Never promote existence to expectation. Survival tales exist. Their weight decides what you should plan around. Treat I'm alive as near zero evidence unless it sits inside a long, well-calibrated independent streak. And if it does, suspect your calibration first. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Anthropics isn't a license to feel special. It's a correction for sampling yourself. Define your class, weight by production, respect typicality, and your updates stop flattering your favorite story. One last layer for simulations and copies. If minds are substrate independent, your reference class expands. Don't count instances. Weight by fidelity and runtime, then by independence, because correlated failures wipe many copies at once. Your forecast lives in the distribution of quality adjusted observer moments actually produced, not in the headcount on a server rack. And here's the payoff that changes behavior. When you reason anthropically with weights, you stop bargaining with miracle branches and start buying typical wins. Safer routes, sleep regularity, better checklists, redundancy that makes facts public. Typicality over measure is not defeatism. It's a compass. It points you toward choices that raise the weight of futures where you actually feel like you, and it keeps you from laundering possibility into a plan. Boltzmann brains, heat death, and the last observer. Let's stress test the logic at the end of time. If cosmic expansion keeps accelerating, free energy thins out and ordinary life winds down. In that far future, rare thermal or quantum fluctuations could assemble brief, isolated minds, Boltzmann brains, with fake memories that flicker and vanish. Some people worry quantum immortality funnels you into those scraps. If any continuer exists, won't you keep waking as the last observer in a cold void? Start with the core mistake, swapping existence for expectation. Boltzmann brains exist in some models. The question is whether they dominate typical, weight-averaged experience. If tails set your expectations, you're planning for futures you almost never meet. What are we actually talking about? A Boltzmann brain is a transient fluctuation that imitates an observer, then dissolves. In simple eternally expanding spacetimes, every allowed configuration has some non-zero chance over absurd timescales. But non-zero isn't typical. Typicality lives in production weight. How much measure physics allocates to each kind of observer moment. Embedded observers, us, sit inside massive, redundant records, stars, biospheres, libraries, data centers, shared histories. Fluctuation observers lack that external consistency. The thing most people miss is that measure belongs to the generative process, not the catalog of logical possibilities. Here's the shortcut that keeps you sane. Weight observer moments by production. Ask, given the processes that make observers, which experiences carry most measure? In many cosmologies, mechanisms suppress Boltzmann dominance. Metastable vacuum decay cuts off runaway futures. Some inflationary measures penalize late, isolated fluctuations. Even modest decay rates swamp the trickle of brains over cosmic time. Details are model-dependent, but the broad lesson stands. Serious physics leans away from universes where freak observers outnumber embedded ones in measure. Now test it against your own dataset. Embedded observers see redundancy everywhere. The cosmic microwave background has coherent correlations across the sky. Geological layers, fossils, and isotope ratios cross-validate. Independent clocks agree. Different people sample different environmental fragments and recover the same facts. That's quantum Darwinism at a cosmic scale. The environment redundantly records pointer information, so objectivity emerges. A Boltzmann brain predicts noisy skies, brittle memories, and no deep redundancy. We don't see that. Your dataset screams embedded, not fluctuated. Here's what's wild. The universe could, in principle, end with trillions of brief, confused minds blinking into existence for microseconds. But measure-weighted, you'll almost certainly never be one of them. Those pixels of experience are microscopic against the bright block of ordinary history. You might still ask, but if any branch exists where I reassemble, don't I eventually land there? No. Existence doesn't buy expectation. Those branches carry minuscule amplitude. Against the ocean of measure already invested in coherent, law-governed histories, their contribution to your expected observer moments is microscopic. It's the same logic as roulette. Tails exist, but you don't plan retirement around them. Another trap is treating heat death like a finish line you must cross. In a many worlds forecast, your weight-averaged future fades as resources fade. Meaningful continuity requires gradients, metabolism, computation. As entropy rises, high-fidelity continuers become rarer and lower weight. Quantum tails don't rescue quality, they thin it. The last observer fantasy is just the immortality error in end-of-time clothing. Use a simple mental model. Visualize your observer moment portfolio across cosmic time. Early and middle epochs pour weight into structured, redundant experiences, civilizations, science, shared records. As free energy dwindles, dividends shrink. Far out, tiny spikes exist, but they're pixels, not pages. Your rational forecast tracks the bright block, not the pixels. A micro story to land it. A colleague joked, "If I ever wake as a Boltzmann brain, I'll finally have proof." The reply, "If you do, every bet you made to get there was already irrational under measure." You don't optimize by dreading absurd futures. You optimize by shifting weight toward valuable continuers while the universe is generous. 2 guardrails stop the slide into last observer lore. 1. Respect typicality over mere possibility. Expect to live through experiences common among measure-weighted observers, not the rarest allowed. 2. Demand external redundancy. The more independent records agree, the stronger the signal you're embedded, not fluctuated. Bottom line, Boltzmann brains and heat-death fantasies live in possibility space. Your expectations live in measure space. Typicality and redundancy plant you in the thick of embedded histories, not at the edge of a lonely void. Quantum immortality versus longevity science. By now the pattern is clear. Survival tales exist, but weights rule expectation. The real question is the one you feel. Will you live long enough and clearly enough to matter? Quantum immortality isn't a health plan, it's a misread of measure. Longevity science, on the other hand, actually shifts weight toward futures you value. If you're making life decisions on some branch saves me, it isn't philosophy, it's a bet. And you're losing. Translate the physics into street-level math. Each year is a hazard gauntlet. accidents, infections, cardiovascular events, cancers, cognitive drift. In a born-weighted forecast, your expected future experience equals the product of survival weights across those hazards, multiplied by psychological fidelity. Lower the hazard rate, protect fidelity, and you multiply expected observer moments you'd be proud to inhabit. That's what evidence-based longevity buys: more, clearer continuers. Concrete numbers make it real. Suppose your baseline annual mortality risk is about 1%. Across 30 years, independence gives percent cumulative mortality. Stack boring but powerful moves: cardiorespiratory fitness, blood pressure and lipid control, safer routes, vaccinations, sleep regularity, and push that annual risk to 0.6%. 30-year cumulative risk drops near 16%. That gap is not extra branches. It's amplitude redirected toward continuers that wake, think clearly, and keep your goals intact. That's the difference between probably fine and probably fine plus 10 extra years of clarity. Now the mistake most people make: treating alive versus dead as the only line. Continuity can thin long before death. Concussions, microstrokes, vascular dementia, chronic sleep debt, depression, each preserves biology while eroding the pattern you care about. In measured terms, you leak amplitude into continuers you wouldn't endorse. So longevity isn't just more years, it's protecting psychological fidelity. What reliably shifts quality-weighted measure? The unsexy basics plus targeted medicine. Sleep regularity stabilizes synaptic and metabolic upkeep. Zone 2 cardio improves mitochondrial efficiency and lowers all-cause mortality. Strength and balance training cut fall risk, an underrated continuity killer. Manage blood pressure, lipids, and glucose to protect microvasculature. Cognition rides on. Vaccinations prevent catastrophic infections that spike mortality and long-term impairment. Preventive screenings catch low-signal, high-impact threats early when treatment preserves more of you. 10 small, independent nudges of 2 to 5% don't add, they multiply. Run a quick audit on something tangible: your commute. Baseline branch: no helmet on the bike, scrolling at lights, night rides without reflectors. Survival weight dips, fidelity dips from stress and micro errors. Reweighted branch: helmet with MIPS, lights front and back, phone in the bag, protected lanes, 10-minute departure buffer. Each tweak is a small amplitude shift. Together they lift the measure of the continuer you want to meet tomorrow. Big swings: CRISPR, senolytics, cryonics, brain-computer interfaces. Use the same lens, expected combs, quality-adjusted observer moments. Multiply 3 things: probability of successful instantiation, psychological fidelity, and runtime quality. If the product clears opportunity, cost, and risk, consider it. But don't launder a 1% shot into certainty by saying some branch works. Tails exist. Typicality rules. A micro story. A viewer said, "If quantum immortality is real, I'll skip the helmet." We ran a decade budget. Head injury odds down with a helmet. Impaired continuity branches trimmed, stress lower with route and lighting changes. Tiny per ride gains multiplied by thousands of rides dominated the tail fantasy. They bought the helmet and fixed their sleep. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches: optimize combs. Weight survival by psychological fidelity and lived value. Practical checklist. Reduce baseline hazard rate across domains: movement, meds, environment, habits. Protect cognition, sleep, cardio, BP, and lipid, learning, social ties. Break correlations. Don't stack alcohol, fatigue, speed, and distraction. Add redundancy, backups for data, identity, and social support. Bottom line, quantum immortality tells a story about existence. Longevity is a practice about weights. You can't hack death. You can stack odds. Every boring choice, sleep, safer routes, screenings, is you voting for the continuer you actually want to be today. Simulation, copies, and continuity. We've been budgeting measure across quantum branches. Now add the digital twist: simulations and copies. If minds are substrate independent, then a faithful emulation running on silicon is a legitimate continuer. The trap is thinking duplication settles identity. It doesn't. Planning happens upstream. Decide which futures to create, protect, and empower. Post-split, each continuer just is themselves. The lever you control is how much continuity-weighted experience gets produced, and under what conditions. Here's the frame that keeps you honest. Don't count heads. Weight observer moments by production quality. In quantum, weight comes from amplitude squared. In compute, weight comes from how many high-fidelity, time-extended observer moments you actually generate, adjusted for independence. 3 dials matter every time you consider copies. First, fidelity. How strongly do memories, values, and cognitive style persist? If fidelity is low, down weight or exclude. A caricature with scrambled memories isn't a continuer you should plan around. Second, duration and quality. Longer, stable runtimes produce more observer moments, clean conditions, adequate compute, low jitter, sane I/O latencies, support clear cognition. Third, independence and redundancy. 1,000 clones on one brittle box is one failure domain. Spread instances across independent substrates, jurisdictions, and vendors to raise expected runtime and cut correlated risk. Let me show you exactly how this guides choices. Tomorrow there's 1 biological U and 3 high-fidelity emulations, each running 8 hours. If you trust fidelity, your pre-decision care allocates substantial weight to those emulations because they'll produce a lot of clear, valuable observer moments. Flip it. Someone spins up 100,000 pings that barely preserve your memories and terminate after seconds. Head count logic says, huge. Continuity budgeting says, tiny weight. Short, low-fidelity blips don't move your expectation. Now here's where most people mess up. They think duplication grants a 50-50 identity split, 2 of me, therefore equal odds. That's head count reasoning in disguise. Your pre-split forecast should track the production weight of continuers, instances times runtime times fidelity, adjusted for independence. Equal fidelity and duration across 2 independent continuers. Then yes, roughly equal weight. Unequal fidelity or runtime. Expectation tilts toward the richer stream of experience. That's the compute domain analog of born weighting. Production, not plurality, governs typicality. A micro story makes this practical. Someone asked, should I fund 5 faithful emulations next year or put all that money into medical care now? We built a measure budget. Skipping care bleeds biological continuity and raises near-term hazards that also threaten any future emulations. Resource loss, stress, poorer oversight. Baseline health first, cheap, compounding reweights, then a small number of high-fidelity emulations with independent infrastructure and clear governance. They left with a portfolio instead of a slogan. Edge cases expose traps worth naming. Malicious or coerced copies produce continuers you don't endorse, don't fund them. Rapid spin-up/spin-down bursts designed to inflate numbers. If fidelity or runtime is trivial, exclude them from your forecast. Head count games don't buy measure, they buy noise. And watch correlation. Platform monocultures, shared code bugs, cloud outages, or legal takedowns can wipe many copies at once. Redundancy across hardware types, providers, geographies, and legal regimes increases expected runtime. Resilience by design. Cryonics plus emulation fits the same lens. Pre-procedure. Allocate care across plausible continuers by their success probabilities, expected fidelity, and runtime quality. If both biological recovery and future emulation succeed, both are genuine continuers. Post-split, each lives their life. The decision problem was upstream. Maximize quality adjusted observer moments across the distribution you can influence. Here's a quick checklist you can actually run. Define your reference class narrowly. Faithful continuers of your current psychology. Quantify weights. Instances times runtime times fidelity times independence. Exclude junk copies and trivial pings. Raise comes with boring wins first. Health, documented values, legal authorizations, encrypted keys, recovery plans named guardians. Add speculative bets last. Cryonics, emulations, BCIs. Fun to the point where expected comes justify opportunity cost and correlated risk. One more micro story. A startup proposed backup consciousness by snapshotting a noisy model every minute. Impressive demo, weak continuity. We pushed them to fewer, longer, higher fidelity runs on diverse hardware, plus real-time integrity checks and independent restores. Their success rate climbed, and so did the production weight of continuers worth caring about. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Copies don't guarantee you, they budget you. Treat simulations like branches with a different weight generator. Optimize the product of three terms: instantiation probability, psychological fidelity, and runtime quality under independence. That composite is the weight your pre-decision care should target. One last clarity line to keep your agency pointed forward. Post-split, each continuer is equally real. The choice that matters is upstream. Which futures do you create, stabilize, and make resilient? Weight by production, not headcount. Fund fidelity, buy independence. And build redundancy so single-point failures stop killing entire storylines. The Steelman, what quantum immortality really says. Let's carve away the hype and keep what's solid. In a unitary branching universe, every outcome allowed by the dynamics evolves into decohered records. Decoherence makes those records effectively autonomous. Interference is gone unless you pull off a heroic global recoherence. The Born rule assigns weights, amplitude squared, to those records, and a rational agent should forecast their future experience by those weights. No consciousness hopping, no privileged thread, no guaranteed tomorrows. Just a clean accounting of where your observer moments land. So why does this puncture the immortality pitch? Because the catchy line, "You never experience your own death," slides from existence to expectation. Of course, experience only occurs in alive branches. That's toothless. Expectation is governed by weight. Repeated hazards multiply survival weight down. Long tails exist with vanishing measure. Typicality says you should expect what typical weighted observers see. Ordinary odds, not cinematic streaks. Here's the Steelman as a compact checklist. 1. Many worlds doesn't add outcomes. It reframes the standard quantum outcomes as persistent branches. 2. Inside that reframing, coherent decision-making values future continuers by Born weight. Deutsch/Wallace decision theory and Jerk's invariance are complementary receipts. 3. Because weights multiply across independent hazards, risky behavior exponentially thins your expected observer moments. Boring safety and health compound them. Now let me show you how this cashes out in dilemmas you actually face. Catastrophic gambles first. You're offered a 1 in 1,000 lethal thrill for a forgettable payoff. Classical expected value says pass. The branching analysis agrees because almost all measure goes to termination or degraded continuers. Repeat the gamble and attrition explodes. Your expected tomorrows collapse like 1 minus Pn. There exists a survival branch, doesn't rescue value. It narrates the rarest story. Asymmetric medical bets next. A procedure offers 70% full recovery, 25% moderate impairment, 5% death. Forecast with 2 dials, weight and continuity. High weight plus high psychological fidelity wins. If the continuity weighted value beats the non-intervention baseline, take it. If not, wait or pivot. Many worlds doesn't change the math. It explains why this math matches lived statistics. What about apparent miracles? You skate through a long streak of independent hazards. The Steelman says, update against your independence assumption, your P estimates, or your apparatus, long before you celebrate a loophole. Tail observations are diagnostics for inputs, not confirmation of destiny. That's Bayesian sanity with branching language. Identity drama. Keep it boring and useful. U is a cognitive pattern with multiple potential continuers after branching. Pre-branch, spread care across them by Born weights. Post-branch, each continuer is equally real and simply themselves. Planning happens upstream. maximize the weight of high-fidelity continuers. The same rule blocks head count traps in simulations. Don't count copies. Weight by fidelity, runtime, and independence, quality-adjusted observer moments. Ethics scales from the same logic. Don't leak measure into futures you don't endorse for you or anyone touched by your choices. Texting while driving, brittle lab protocols, sloppy deploys. They export risk. Redundancy, checklists, pre-registration, conservative stop rules. Those reallocate weight towards stable records and healthier continuers. Quantum Darwinism's lesson. Objectivity from redundancy doubles as a life strategy. Redundancies make teams, projects, and communities resilient to single-point decoherence. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Measure budgeting. Treat amplitude squared like probability capital. Daily choices reallocate that capital upstream. Small, independent improvements, sleep regularity, safer routes, seatbelts, medication adherence, multiply. Correlated risks, alcohol plus fatigue plus speed plus rain, torch capital far faster than your gut predicts. Hunt independence in your improvements. Hunt correlation in your hazards. Let's land this with two fast micro stories. A wingsuit fanatic told me, "There's a branch where I'm fine." We built a measure budget, whether windows, rest discipline, gear inspections, exit rehearsals, conservative go/no-go thresholds. Same thrill, fewer correlated risks. Their near-miss rate collapsed. They started teaching the checklist to new jumpers, weights over wishes. A researcher swore they could prove their luck. We ran a pre-registration, hypotheses, outcomes, updates. Every path led to the same post. Failure deleted the reporter. They dropped the stunt and designed a reversible which path demo instead, evidence in every branch. 5 rules you can run tomorrow. Claim only what you can cash. Survival tails exist. Weights decide expectation. Forecast with weights, not head counts. Typicality is your anchor. Optimize the portfolio. Stack small, independent improvements that compound. Protect continuity, not just survival. Sleep, cardiovascular health, cognitive hygiene, social ties. Test plumbing, not bravado. Support interference control, decoherence mapping, redundancy, and reversibility. Here's the thing, you can't hack death, but you can stack odds. Every boring choice, sleep, routes, screenings, is you voting for the continuer you want to be. If a belief can't lose on paper, it can't win in reality. If an experiment silences its failures, it can't teach you. Many worlds gives you weights, not extra lives. Your power is upstream. Shift measure toward futures where the pattern you care about actually thrives. Not tomorrow, today. Because every hour you spend in low-weight branches is an hour you're not living as the person you meant to be. A mental model you can use. Measure budgeting. Here's the mental model that turns all this into daily moves. Measure budgeting. Treat amplitude squared like probability capital. You don't mint more by counting branches. You reallocate what already flows by shaping upstream conditions so more of your continuers show up clear-minded and intact. Start with why this matters. Choices feel local. Drive a bit faster, skip sleep, multitask in traffic. In a branching world, each micro-decision tilts weight toward or away from continuers you'd be proud to be. Small leaks compound. Small safeguards compound. Once that lands, habits stop sounding like chores and start looking like compounding returns. The tool is simple. For any decision, sketch 3 columns in your head. Continuity quality, memory integrity, attention, long horizon planning, mood stability. Survival weight, how the choice shifts your odds of being around tomorrow and next month. External impact, what it does to other people's continuers. Family, teammates, strangers on your road. Good moves lift the first 2 for you without dumping risk on others. Bad moves do the opposite, often through correlations your gut underestimates. Let me show you exactly how to run it on a mundane risk. Late night driving in rain. Baseline path, you leave exhausted, highway speed notifications on. Survival weight dips from fatigue, weather, distraction. Continuity quality dips from stress and micro errors. External impact rises for everyone near you. Reweighted pathway. Nap 20 minutes, leave earlier, take slower lit streets, phone in do not disturb, lane keep on. Each tweak is a small amplitude shift. Together they raise the weight of continuers who wake up fine tomorrow. Reweighted path B, carpool with a rested friend. Now you add redundancy, 2 alert minds, shrinking correlated failure. Here's the trap most people fall into, chasing one big hack while ignoring independent levers. Weights multiply. 2 to 3% improvements beat 10% swing. Sleep regularity, safer routes, seatbelts, hydration, and a 2-minute pre-drive checklist don't add, they compound. Run a 10-minute audit you can actually keep. Pick a termination branch you'd hate. Crash, stroke, catastrophic data loss, relationship rupture. List cheap shifters that hit independent pathways. Helmets, backups, 2FA checklists, blood pressure meds, earlier departures. Phone stays in bag near traffic. Patch continuity leaks. Chronic sleep debt, unmanaged stress, chaotic calendars, alcohol creeping into weeknights. Do the same for your digital life. Termination branch, ransomware or lockout. Shifters, password manager, hardware keys, offline encrypted backups, phishing rehearsal, quarterly restore tests. Continuity leaks, scattered files, no versioning, endless tabs. One afternoon of setup reallocates months of weight toward calmer continuers with fewer fire drills. Redundancy is the game changer. Quantum Darwinism's lesson, objectivity from redundant records, becomes resilience from redundant supports. 2 independent backups in different places, documented processes another person can run, shared credentials in a secure vault, cross-training a teammate. Those are amplitude shifters because single-point failures stop wiping entire storylines. Avoid 3 common errors. Counting copies. 2 backups on the same drive are 1 failure domain. Ignoring correlations. Alcohol plus fatigue plus speed plus rain is multiplicative harm, not 4 small nudges. Chasing tails. There's a branch where I'm lucky is lottery logic with quantum pain. Make it weekly and boring on purpose. Choose 1 routine risk, commute, lifting, deploys, inbox. Pick 3 low-friction interventions. Run them 7 days. On day 8, write what changed. Fewer near misses, smoother mornings, lower spikes. Keep what paid, add 1 new lever next week. That's compounding. A few amplitude shifters most people underuse. Default bed and wake windows 7 days a week. Zone 2 cardio most days, plus 2 strength and balance sessions weekly. 2-minute checklists for repeat tasks with failure costs. Wallet keys phone, stove off, door locked. Quarterly backup restore tests, not just backups. Annual screenings and medication adherence with reminders you don't snooze. Pre-commit safer routes and departure buffers. Ethics fits naturally. Budget measure for everyone touched by your choices. Texting while driving, brittle lab practices, sloppy deploys. They export risk to other continuers. Use the same 3 columns for your team. Ask, did this decision raise continuity weighted measure for all stakeholders? A quick micro story. A researcher treated sleep as optional. We mapped their portfolio. Commute close calls, lab errors, immune hits, sour meetings, rework. 6 weeks of tight sleep windows, no screens in bed, and a 5-minute daily plan cut near misses to near 0 and doubled deep work hours. Same person, same job, different measure distribution. Clearer mornings, calmer decisions, fewer fires. Nothing mystical, just closing a slow leak and letting compounding work. Score yourself with CUMs, quality adjusted observer moments. Every choice ask, does this raise CUMs for me and for the people around me? When in doubt, prefer small, independent nudges that are easy to keep. You'll feel the difference as surprises get rarer and good days stack. Bottom line, measure budgeting as agency. You can't own miracle tales. You can steer the weights. Make high-weight branches safer, saner, and more meaningful, and you'll meet more of yourself where life actually feels like you. Key takeaway: many worlds doesn't hand you extra lives. It hands you weights, and every boring, upstream choice awaits the futures where your best continuer actually shows up. If you want the rigorous plumbing, decoherence experiments, pointer states, and the born rule arguments pros use, watch the next video queued now. Subscribe for weekly reality checks that turn wild physics into clear moves. Not tomorrow, today. Shift the weight toward the life you'd be proud to keep waking up in.